No, it's okay. I mean, I'm Steve Jobbing it for some reason, so. but it is relatively cold in Munich.
I think it's relatively cold everywhere now.
Yeah, pretty fair. Okay. Is there a function? Okay, that's interesting. Let's give it I would say let's give it until maybe 3-4 minutes past, and then we can. I think then we're pretty good. Just for people to get here. Maybe in the meantime, for the people that are already here, if you have any questions, there will be a Q&A at the end. I will announce this again in a couple of minutes, but if you have already questions ready, which obviously you probably don't because you don't know exactly what it's about, I'll be announcing the agenda as well. You can add them into the chat, and my colleague Tanya, who's the person with the logo you can see in the screen, she will take care of it and gather and fast forward to us later on. It's always interesting once you announce the agenda, then most people can decide if they want to stay. We won't judge you for it, but we'll know. That's okay. Okay. All right. So I'm thinking we can't see the person with the logo. yeah. This is my colleague Tanya. Or in this case, our colleague Tanya. Okay, guys. Because the evening is not getting any earlier, I say let's begin. Thank you very much for joining and taking the personal time to join us here today. It should be a very joyous occasion. My name is Bijan. I'll be your host and moderator. Joining me today is Roma, Tim, and Tancho. Very proud and very happy to have you guys here on this topic specifically. For anybody that doesn't know what we do, we're a product dev company from Munich and Skopje. We have around 130 very talented engineers, architects, and consorts working for clients globally, mainly remote, which is why this topic is quite near to us and quite dear to us. And it's always good to get the opinion of other companies of how they might be doing it better or differently, in fact. I'm just going to run through the agenda points very quickly so you can actually choose for yourselves if you want to stay. Again, if you want to leave, that's fine. We'll know. It's okay. We won't judge. It's late, but we'll know. And then afterwards, it would be really cool if you guys could give a short introduction on yourselves, your past 3 maybe stations, experiences, and then we can dive into a nice discussion. We'll probably start off with the main topic, scaling and managing teams, building things remotely. We'll probably keep it in the context of COVID as well, which means we'll talk about if that has changed your current work setup, if it's changed anything at all, how has it impacted the actual management of teams, how has hiring been going, and do you see any benefits to using external partners, either for hiring or actually also development resources? We'll dive a little bit into the methodologies, all kinds of team setups, if there are any different ones, and also, of course, the biggest learning lessons and the biggest fails, which is obviously a personal favorite. Okie dokie, at this point, I'll hand over to you guys. Maybe Romain, you can start, and then we'll go through the other ones, and then we'll kick it off. Thank you.
Sure. Thanks a lot, Bijan and Intertech for the invitation, obviously. So my name is Romain. I have been working for the past 4 years at Uber as a product manager, mainly in payments. I originally joined on what we call partner payments. So basically the ability for drivers, couriers, and restaurants to be able to onboard a payment method and be able to receive the earnings they have accrued on the platform into that payment method. And for the last 3 years, I mainly focus on payment method expansion. So ensuring that everyone everywhere can basically access Uber by removing all payments barriers. So during that time, I had the opportunity to launch hundreds of payment methods across 65 different countries. So that was quite an amazing and challenging experience. Prior to that, I had the opportunity to work with Bijan and some of the folks at Intertech when I was in Munich. Was working for one of the rocket internet venture called the Global Saving Group, as well as product manager, where I was more in charge of a portfolio of different websites, mainly focusing on acquisition, conversion rate optimizations, and retention, as well of the users coming on the different platforms. And last but not least, one of my first experience was at Johnson & Johnson, this big pharmaceutical American company, where I was working with top, let's say, FMCG brands like Nicorette, Biafine, Neutrogena, and I was basically working on digital experience that would complement the physical goods that Johnson would be saying, such as smoking cessation programs, for example. That's about it for my journey, and now handing it over to Tim.
Okay, yeah, thank you. Yeah, well, my name is Tim Streiter. I'm CTO at Interone in Proximity since 2019. Honestly, I started my career as a front-end developer, going down to the back-end in the Java stack, and now I'm working full stack again. Almost on clients, blue chip clients, automotive clients, within web technologies, e-commerce systems, ramping up European e-commerce systems for our clients, and yeah, go over with doing some tech leadership. And yeah, now, as I said already, CTO of 2 companies, working in a digital agency business and a software solution provider. And yeah, I'm very excited to being part of the panel talk today, because we had a big exchange with Bijan in the last months on how we could scale and ramp up our teams. Yeah, thank you for being here, and hand over to Tancho.
Hi guys. First, thank you for having me on the call. So for the group, for the audience, a quick introduction. My name is Tancho. I'm the CTO of EasyCap. In the last, I guess, like 3-4 years, I've been working in the world of banks and fintech generally. I've been here as a CTO for the last year. I think last week was 1 year to the day. Prior to that, I worked in a company called Symphony, which is kind of in the same area. Now I'm working mostly with the French banks, so BPCE, like Banque Populaire, Caisse d'Épargne in France. And we provide a solution as which is essentially a loyalty program for small merchants. Again, prior to EasyCap, I was working in Symphony as a senior director of engineering. There, we're primarily focusing on the communication channels between big banks. So we would work by, let's say, in the direction of enabling the employees within the bank to communicate to each other in a secure and let's say controlled environment, which supports encryption, etc. Like the banking sector is really specific about how they do their dealings. And then prior to that, I was working in Content Square, which was a French startup that was, I think it was like announced as one of the most highly valued startups in France in the last decade. It got like $500 million in investments about 6 months ago, with $4 billion of evaluation. I've been working with remote teams for the last surprisingly like 3 years, 4 years now. So I had full remote teams in different geographies before COVID was a thing. So I'm very happy to be here, guys, with you, and look forward to the discussion we'll have.
Super, thank you very much, guys. Super intros, very exciting. Maybe because you mentioned it, Hansho, we can dive right into the first question or the first topic. Let's say impact of COVID. Let's keep this short. I think we're all quite tired of hearing that word, but it is omnipresent. But has it impacted you at all? Has it changed anything really, or has it mainly affected the like war on talent, as I think we're all noticing? Maybe you, Tancho, first, because you mentioned remote as the last person.
Yeah, sure. So for one, I think COVID impacted different organizations differently. Why I'm saying that, in the prep call that we did, Tim made a very interesting, kind of gave a very interesting idea that COVID impacted companies on a different level, individually on the people, but also organizations as a whole. If I try to compare my two experiences under COVID, so Symphony being one, EasyCap being another, both companies were very differently impacted. Symphony was by design remote, because you would, like, I had people in Vietnam, in Stockholm, in London, in Palo Alto, in where else, like in a bunch of other places, in Skopje as well, with you guys. So those teams were less affected because the only problem would be you would have people that would be with their cat at home. You would hear the vacuum cleaner, you would hear the kids in the background, but like generally people are used to speaking remotely. Whereas this company, where people were used to being in the office together with each other, COVID impacted this group very differently because it put them apart. So from my experience, COVID definitely introduced a change with everyone. We now can see and remember everybody's background in their kids' room or in their living room or in the hallway. But it introduced, again, the impact was different based on the organization, how people are used to working with each other. If you're used to working in the same room, it has a big impact on you, right? One way or the other. If you're used to working remotely, then it'll probably be less of an impact, but there's definitely, let's say, the quality of the chair you're using, the desk you're using, again, the background on Zoom, etc.
Yep. How about you, Roma? Tim?
Yeah. I can jump in. I think, for me, COVID pretty much affected like companies mainly in two ways, like taking, my example from Uber. I think the first one is the way of working. Prior to COVID-19, basically at Uber, people were having like more or less one day to be able to work from home. And basically, from one day to another, all the people had to work remotely from home. And obviously this drastically changed everything. Like you can't go with your team in, like jam session in front of the whiteboard, or, like go just to the desk of a stakeholder that you want, to grab 5 minutes with to discuss an important point in one of the projects. You have, to schedule time, you have to book time in their calendar and so on. And I think on the positive side, it's good because it allows people to have some more focus time and not being disturbed every 5 minutes, so they can be more productive. But on the other side, for people like me that like, this in-person work as well, and the ability, like to share ideas inside a room, face to face, to be able, to bounce off ideas and so on, that can, for some, specific tasks, decrease a bit your productivity. And I don't think the Zoom, the Miro, the Figma, or whatsoever managed to, despite the great job that they're doing on their product, manage to bridge the gap with the reality. The second thing, different to work, is more hiring. I think a lot of things have changed with COVID. Like if you read the tendency that's coming from the US recently, actually around like, I think it's around more than 20% or 25% of the Americans have actually left their job. And are actually, like trying to change job. And you have seen like different things done by companies like Uber, Amazon, or big tech giants. They basically give retention grants to their best performer to ensure that they can stay in the forms of stock. They have reduced their cliff for stock, and they have increased salary. And a lot of companies are actually following that move to ensure that they can retain people. So today the market is actually, like really, really hot for candidates, especially in the tech scene. And I'm only talking about the tech scene. And one of the reasons for that is because now everyone can work from everywhere. Like with the opening of the remote, culture, now companies that are based in the Silicon Valley or based in, let's say, London or whatsoever, they can hire literally from everywhere in the world. So that's really opened the pool of candidates. And that's allowed candidates to apply for much more opportunities. So I think it's really changed basically the way people are working and the way companies are hiring, which is really interesting.
Yeah, very interesting ideas, and I can say same to us as well. When COVID hit us, we were used to work in a kind of hybrid way where we have co-located teams working in the office and have team extensions with partners remotely. We were used to work across our different offices, but that was only a few parts of the daily work. And COVID forced us to go 100% remotely from one day to another, where we as a tech and a digital company did not face any big problems. Yeah, we were used to work with the tools you mentioned, like Figma, like Miro, like Teams calls. It was all there, but the schedule was the biggest problem. Yeah, nothing in parallel at the coffee shop, and nothing in parallel in the kitchen, just having a small talk and having the stakeholders on the whiteboard, just the schedule. But this is not a big problem when you're working on this. I think even the second factor, what is about hiring, is a big factor we face at the moment, because the first question is, okay, how much time I can work from home? Yeah, well, no problem from our side, because we will stay at a hybrid model and we will work from home, because in a software company in IT, it's no problem working from home, having concentrated time to work on your code and have some meetings in the office or having meetings remotely. But as you say, the market is open now, and it's not a local market anymore where we have candidates from Hamburg in Hamburg, or Munich in Munich, or Düsseldorf in Düsseldorf, or Berlin, Berlin. We have companies all over the world which are now attending the high potentials what we were on as well. So this is a big war for talent thing at the moment, and yeah, it's a problem, I think, for everybody.
How did you experience the retention topic, Tim? So I know that Romain mentioned what they do at Uber, or maybe like larger companies, but what was your method of trying to retain talent?
We had a big issue with some of our employees, but mainly our software developers stayed because we act very fast and supported them in a way. But and they're very happy with us. So but I think it's a social thing, because a lot of employees work for a long time in our company, and they are bounded like nothing else, because we did work such a long time together. And yeah, but it's very difficult to keep people. Yeah,
I mean, churn organically happens, right? It's there was this research I saw a couple of years ago, 2018, end of 18, we, as I joined the Symphony in the south of France, there was this research that was done on Europe by the HR department, which is the amount of time people spend in a company on average per geography, per country, per city. And surprisingly, in Europe, I mean, I guess it's not a big surprise, but for me at the time it was, in Europe, people tend to stay more in a company than in the US, right? And then there's the differentiation between countries within the EU. I think COVID first slowed down churn. People stayed where they were because of security. Nobody knew what was going on. Everybody stopped everything. Like in most of the companies, at least let's say where I feel the pulse, I know that bonuses, raises were canceled, new positions were blocked, etc. Like every one of us probably noticed that on their own. And then after a while, we noticed that we can actually survive, and some companies discovered that they can thrive, so they reopened again. And then when this happens, there's a bunch of recruiters which will call your guys, and I'm sure that every one of us has received calls in the meantime, and probably everyone in the audience as well. So this organically happens. At one point in time, there's like 3 people in your team leaving, and you kind of get into this mindset, and things will happen. So it's normal. It's not the end of the world. And like churn, by definition, is difficult for any organization to go through. You're losing people. You need to replace them. So I'm not sure about Germany, but I know that in France, replacing person A with a person B, let's say, but in seat, right, takes you about 9 months. You need 3 months to wait for the person, to wait for HR to create a pipeline, to go through interviews, and then to sign a contract. 3 more months for the person to quit their previous job and join this one, and then 3 more months to really get them up to speed with what we're doing. So it's really 9 months of time that you need to spend. And if you miss any steps in between, it's going to be longer than 9 months. So I mean, it's an issue regardless, right?
Yeah, I'm totally with you. But it's been an issue, and it's not another now due COVID, but I think the software and tech market is a hard market at the moment, regardless of COVID.
Yeah,
it's been a war of talents before.
That's true. Yeah, the past, let's say 5 to 10 years have been absolutely manic. I think everybody agrees. Okay, talent, I think, so we actually have a question in the chat. Thank you very much. I'll keep it for later, because I just want to make sure that we cover everything we have until 1940, and then we go through the questions, unless you guys think we want to discuss it right now. What do you guys say?
It's up to you. You're the moderator, Bijan.
Yeah.
Well, it's a democracy at the end of the day, and it's your time also. So if you feel like it's, you know what, we'll park it for later. But we'll get back to it at the later end. I think it's easier. Let's dive a little bit into methodologies. I think in our sync, Roma, you talked like a lot about the importance, or maybe the like lack of importance, or the lack of, or sometimes the potential benefit of a lack of like methodologies that can work extremely well in terms of management and teams, especially in a setup where you're kind of like managing techies and vice versa. Maybe you could explore a little bit that topic.
Yeah, definitely. So prior to joining Uber, I've worked at different companies. I've worked at a LinkedIn competitor, French LinkedIn competitor called Viadeo. I've worked at Johnson & Johnson, as I said, and I work at the Global Saving Group. And in all those companies, one of the patterns that I find really on product and tech on the organization is that they were quite established methodology of way of working. In a lot of time, it was Agile or Scrum, whatever you call that, with the entire process that you had to follow, like the stand-up, the grooming, the retrospective, and all those meetings, and everything like well structured with all the attendance. And when I joined Uber, I was actually like pretty surprised to discover that there was not a methodology that people would follow, but more guiding principle. So I'm not saying that there is a lack of structure. There is a structure, but because people are agreeing to principles, like whenever you start a project, there needs to be a kickoff sharing all the information about the why, the what, and the how. At any stage of the project, we need to be transparent. So transparency is one of the principles. So that means that we need to be able to have one project tracker that anyone could look at any moment in time. And we don't care if the project tracker is on Asana or on Google Spreadsheet or on Jira whatsoever. This is up to the engineer or up to the team that is running the project on their own. So basically, the following principle that we had at Uber is that we really empower each team to basically decide and be in charge of the tools that they want to use in order to be able to execute. We really believe, that basically all the engineers, the designers, and so on are really, we really want to empower them and to trust them in the execution phase. And basically, we give them, or we agree with everyone on the operating principle that we want to follow. And I feel that agreeing on that level of principle, rather than be, like just sticking to a methodology that you have like read in a book, rather it's, like Agile, Scrum, Kanban, or Shape Up, or whatsoever, allow you to have much more freedom to customize it to your needs. And on the other side of things, because you agree on the objective with your team, I feel that I saw way better result on the execution and way less frustration on the methodology, because people feel that they are defining their own methodology, kind of. So for me, it was better results and less frustration coming down from that methodology, because we rather agree on principles rather than on the methodology itself. And that was honestly one of the biggest learning. And I think if I join another company afterwards that have like so guided principle, I would probably struggle with that.
Very, very fair points, guys. What do you think? Controversial, one might say.
Well, we tried in a little way, in the same way, because we want to give our teams some kind of freedom on how they implement our principles as well. But we were not so free regarding some tools because we have more or less a guidance from a holding structure. So there's nothing the freedom is not there to go to Google or something like this. But how they interact with our guidance, our principles on, we want to work in an agile way. The teams can decide how they interpret agile at the way, because it always depends on how we work together with our clients and how the clients can contribute to the process, and so on and so on and so on. I think this works very well if the team is committed to their own process. And if you go to the team and say, well, this is a process, work with it, live with it, it's always some kind of struggle in the way. Getting back to our discussion panel today with working remotely, the Agile way was a big chance to integrate remote teams, because we have very short iterations and you have a lot of interaction with all the team members. And this is very important to us. To me, I think it's one of the key factors having success, having direct interaction with the team and have the ability to, talk a lot. And this is something we mentioned earlier, which goes away with having only remote sessions, but it's very important to me. So Agile was a way, it works fine, but I do not have any other, I cannot compare to other ways, because we only work.
I mean, Agile is not going to be Agile if you follow it by the book, right? So I'm sure that if you even go through all your teams, there's going to be a difference in the process and the difference in how things work. What confuses me is, like, according to Sapiens, a social structure can have a tree of communication between 100 people only, right? Above 100 people, you cannot establish and maintain social channels of communication. You lose those eventually above 100 people. So I'm quite interested in what Romain was saying, because in a company like Uber, how many employees do you guys have?
Oh, I would not be able to tell you the number, but
approximately. Are we talking we're talking about 10,000 or in that range, right?
We are talking more than 10,000, and I think in people and tech, it's something like 3,000, 3,000 and a half, something like
this. Yeah, so there's no way that organization can continue functioning with people talking to each other. Like, there's up. Yeah. In the previous company, we had 600 engineers. I can tell you for a fact, I didn't know half of the people. Like, I never exchanged with them. And I'm sure that in Uber is the same way. The thing is that when you give people that much power, you need to have a way to yield it, right? If the way you said it is like you give them the ability to choose their tracking tool, it could be Excel. Like from your perspective, or rather from an organization perspective, giving them Excel is fine. The question is, which methods do you put in place to make sure that they have a deliverable that they achieve? And then at the end of the day, Agile is just a contract between people. The most important piece about Agile is not the fact that there are rules in the 2 weeks, rather that there are targets that you achieve at the end of the 2 weeks. So what you do in between is actually up to the team to decide, right?
Yeah.
And if you put these kinds of intermittent milestones where you say every month you need to tell me what you're going to achieve by end of month, and then you need to tell me whether you achieved it or not, then I agree, it makes sense. But I'm curious to know, like, as an organization, it should be extremely complex to deal with this kind of a method. Like, I'm sure that there's at least one team that uses Excel to track stuff. Like, how do you deal with this kind of an approach? How do you allow people to use whatever they want?
I think you bring a really valid point, which is one of the points I wanted to set across. I think what you say about Agile is, I feel that in a lot of companies I work in the past, Agile was seen like more as like a suite of steps to follow, you know, rather than a principle, like a contract that you agree between people. And I think what I like in terms of methodology at Uber is that basically, like when you join the product org, we tell you, okay, that's the guiding principle that you are agreeing with, where you have to first write a brief, then you have to write a product requirement documentation, etc., etc. But in between those things, like it's up to you to decide how many meetings you need to have with stakeholders in order to align on X, Y, Z or whatsoever. Or so they are overall like guiding principles. But I feel that from the get-go, people agree on principles rather than being, like super rigid about the methodology, which I felt that, in 50 or 60% of the organizations, people are rather like super rigid about the methodology rather than thinking about like actually what they want to achieve with that methodology, which is more like, what principles do we want to agree on working together?
It's sorry.
No, that's.
I was gonna say it's super funny for me when I see somebody that has a title in their resume or LinkedIn profile or wherever, and it says like their position in that company was Scrum Master. Like for me, that makes absolutely no sense. Like an engineer that was an engineer for example, 7 years, and then for the last year, you're no longer an engineer, you're now a Scrum Master. That like in the world of Agile, like that makes no sense because you're applying and reinforcing rules by adopting a methodology which says rules no longer apply and you can be flexible, right?
Yeah.
So is that person coding, or is that person just working within Jira, making sure that people put a fixed version and an assignee and a description of done and a subject and an epic?
Yeah.
So I like the approach. Like I usually, with my teams, I try to set up every decision in such a way that it's very safe for people to fail, whether it's project management in sense which methodology we use. I'm trying to kind of empower people to use something new, which I recently got a hold of, which is called Shape Up. I don't know if you guys had the chance of, okay. So it's a nice thing, which sounds promising, but I'm worried that people might get too excited about it. The other thing is, like even through let's say within deployments, within those topics, I'm trying to put things in a way that it's safe to fail. But what I found out is that when it comes to Agile, like I'm absolutely fine to say to folks, use Kanban or Scrum boards if you prefer one or the other. But I want to reinforce the mechanism where at the end of a time frame, you have a deliverable you're going to bring. And then the approach, right? And the approach is you can deliver or not. But the important thing is if you do, then keep quiet until you do at the date when we agree. And if you don't, then raise an alarm as soon as possible.
No, and don't get me wrong, when I definitely agree in some structure, what I was saying is that the structure of basically, or the way of working together at Uber is more, we agree on the on the principles rather than, you know, following a methodology that is already written in a book step by step. And obviously, you know, like committing on timeline, having timeline, breaking project into milestones, having details about where the project is at any time. Definitely, that's part of it. But it's more, you know, the engineers, for example, when we reach the execution phase, when we decide that this engineer is going to lead the project, and usually we have rotating leads, you know, so it's allow everyone, you know, to basically like start mastering those skills of project management and so on. They're going to be engineer and wear the hat as well of the project manager. And basically, you know, they're going to be in charge of updating the project tracker, whereas it's on Jira, on Google Spreadsheet or whatsoever. And they're as well going to be in charge of writing a weekly or a bi-weekly newsletter where they're going to send to all the stakeholders as like, hey, that's what we have done. That's what is left to be done. That's where we are on the milestone. And that's the different risks that we have. And so, basically, you know, that's like, there is not a template for the newsletter whatsoever. We just, you know, at the beginning of the project, they're going to see, oh, actually the last team or the last newsletter I saw from that team was actually cool. I'm going to reuse the last template. The objective of what we want is that there is communication, you know, around this project, not that everything is templatized the same way or whatsoever. It's like whatever you feel comfortable with, as long as you are able to respect the principle. And I feel that when you have that way of working, people even become advocates, you know, of that methodology because they are the one that have been defining it. Like this engineer would be, yeah, I'm the one that is sending the newsletter, and it's not the Scrum Master whatsoever. So they basically like, they're not going to criticize the methodology because they have contributed to basically creating it. And so you have more advocate with you on supporting that way of working.
So there's a catch in what you said, which I really, really like. Which is, we kind of did the same thing. We put a trigger in Jira that allows at the end of every sprint, it summarizes all the tickets which were done. It characterizes them by story, incident, security bug, regular bug, whatever, defect. And it sends out a newsletter which is systematically created by Jira. So in a way, we created a systematic support for Kanban and Scrum. At the end of 2 weeks, you get the, as you said, the newsletter out. We didn't give it a name, but like this existed. And what kind of happened is some teams decided that they don't want to do manual work to prepare this newsletter. So they adopt what's already there. Other teams decided that well, mostly this was impacting product, but other teams said like, we're going to give it a try and try to create our own newsletter. But eventually everybody kind of failed, like let's say, fell back at the default.
Yeah, but in the end, it's let's call it a framework. Let's call it use some principles, adopt them if you think that they are relevant for your project.
Yeah.
And if you give the team the ability to choose from a variety of tools, they will commit on the tools. It's and I think it's more the mindset than the framework than the process itself.
Certainly very, very valid points. I'm just looking at the time. Obviously very, very good that you guys got into it. I'm just thinking we should probably wrap it up with one final question. I don't think we have enough time for everything, but from the management and the methodologies, maybe also the actual operative communication with teams and in different places, what were your biggest learning lessons? And obviously also for like everybody to enjoy, if there are any, the largest fails. And then we'll hop on to the questions because there actually are quite a couple ones that are relevant. Who wants to begin?
Probably this time I start. Well, I mentioned before the hardest part or the biggest learning lessons was how to build up some kind of relationship between people they never met before. So having some kind of social events in a digital way feels a little stupid in the beginning, but it's very important to have some kind of talks with a beer in the evening with the teammates together. And this works very well if you go for it and you show yourself in some kind of these meetings so that it's important to you. And then there is a learning that there is not so a big difference in culture when they all work for tech. It's some kind of the same all over the world. It's not so a big difference between people though. And yeah,
do you mean the communication, Tim, or do you mean the cultural location?
I mean the culture between the culture of software developers all over the world is some kind of the same. So, and if you meet on a display, it's some kind of funny in the beginning, but it works very well if you go for it and take it very, give it a strong point in your building up the teams. Yeah? You need to have social events beside your working events. So, and they should be as much free to go and come in. Yeah. We started with some meetings where everybody was free to come and join all over a time period from, I think, 2-3 hours in the evening, where teammates met because they didn't have the chance to see them in the office again. And it was very interesting to join these events where at the end they were watching Netflix together. So there are very strong relationships, and that's what's very funny to see. Yeah,
Netflix and still bringing people together.
Yeah.
I think I can. Oh, sorry.
No.
I wanted to plus one on what you said, Tim. I think for me personally at Uber in Amsterdam, just in tech, we were having like 60 plus different nationality, like 60. We were a remote site, because we have sites like in San Francisco, in the Bay Area, in New York, in Hyderabad, in India, and really like all over the world. And basically, whereas it was during COVID where, everyone was basically working from home, or whereas it was, in prior to the pandemic where you had to work with folks in the US, folks in India, folks in Brazil, or whatsoever, you basically are sometimes working with people like you never met in real life. And basically what I discover is, meeting them in person, whereas it's for business trips and, you have the opportunity to go to San Francisco and let's go to restaurants, or let's go to bar after work, or whatsoever, or even spending your lunch with them at the cafeteria. And, instead of being like, as my job is a product manager, I'm asking a lot of favors from people, like asking some spare capacity in their roadmap when I have dependencies or whatsoever. And instead of being just like a guy in Amsterdam that is asking them for capacity, I become a guy, maybe I hope the cool guy that share a beer with them, after work, and that's some fun and play, I don't know, like pool or whatsoever, and that completely changed the mindset. Because then instead of, hey, there is a random guy in Amsterdam asking me for a favor or for some spare capacity in my roadmap, it's like, oh, there is this guy, we're kind of, maybe not friend, but like we have a cool connection. And I know that if I give him this favor, when I need a favor as well, he's going to try to find a way or hack a way, like to basically squeeze that into his capacity and into his roadmap. And I think that's extremely important. And even, like when it's not a remote site, but even if it's within the same site, but different stakeholders, like product manager, we're used to work with ops, with com ops, like support, with marketing or whatsoever. And spending times, like, whereas it's having lunch or whereas it's outside of work, having a drink or whatsoever, is extremely important, because that's how you to discover the world and the other side, and the other jobs that there is in the company. And that's how you to have some empathy towards those jobs and those people. Because, you need to assume that everyone is coming with good attention, and everyone wants to do good for the business. And basically, sometimes like you don't agree on a topic, but it's just because you don't understand the other people perspective. And, spending times basically with those peoples like outside of work or even at lunch or whatsoever, really allow you sometimes to put yourself into their shoes. And you basically going to say, oh, but okay, no, I understand why they are asking me that, because they told me, during this time we met that actually they were working on X or Y objectives or whatsoever, or, and the conversations and the kind of relations you're going to establish with them are going to be much more transparent, much more direct, and they're going to be much more less of like, you get offended or people get offended or whatsoever. And it's going to be a much more better, let's say, place to work and friendly environment for you. So I really encourage that, honestly, because for me, it was really like a valid tips and allowed me to create like really deep connections with colleagues. And I think it's especially important in time of COVID. For example, with some of my engineers that were working close by to my neighborhood in Amsterdam, we started doing walking one-on-ones. So we were not able to meet more than 4 people. So basically what we were doing when we were having one-on-ones, we just meet, in front of a building and just do, 30 minutes walking and chatting at the same time. And, being in the fresh air and so on as well, allow you to have a nice break from your day, but as well allow you to be in a different environment than, just work. So it was as well pretty productive. And I was feeling that we were having much more direct and deep conversation, honestly.
So I mean, you're emphasizing a very interesting aspect of things. I did exactly the same thing, by the way. With I switched companies when in the middle of, I think it was between wave number 2 and 3 in France. I'm not exactly sure which one it was, but like one of the waves, right? And at the time when I switched, we were about to be locked down for 6 months, where we can leave our house for 1 hour with a radius of 1 kilometer. So you can imagine how fun it was when you're locked in with both your kids at home and like full agenda on calls, because people, well, in any case, we're human beings, we're not computers, right? We need to have this social relationship with people in order to work together, regardless of how much you want to distract that. Like when you're reviewing somebody's PR, when you are designing, when you're talking on a design document, when you are discussing an architecture, usually you get the wrong idea when you read a phrase. You want to hear it from the person saying, and you want to make a conclusion based on their voice, because you need to know whether they're saying like, oh, wow, or oh, wow, right? One is good, one is bad. I mean, I'm giving a very obvious example, hopefully, but we tend to associate interpretation of things which are written with an emotional reaction. So these things which you mentioned are extremely important. I would really suggest even to the audience, even if there's a lockdown, even if you need to wear a mask and not meet people, if there's the possibility for you to spend a little bit of time with a person that you think your relationship professionally could need some work, do a one-to-one, which is an outside walking one-to-one. You can still have the discussion, but it's extremely important to keep this relationship. There are some people which I've met which can with which have successfully built a relationship via online meetings, but it's extremely difficult.
Yeah, it's very hard.
We need to feel a pulse from another person, and everybody has experienced Zoom fatigue. I know it's I'm probably not the only one. We try to use Huddle, for example, on Slack as much as we can, because it's not a formal meeting. So try it out. But I think definitely COVID is a weird beast, and it's not only COVID. It's how our governments collectively are responding to this with all the lockdowns and all the health passes and whatever else. I even saw a question in the audience that asking exactly about this topic, but I'm not going to touch it yet.
Thank you very much. I think that's a very good last point. I cannot agree more on the last point, especially even from a sales perspective. Let's quickly go through the questions. We've hit it on the nail time-wise. First one from Alexander. Are there government limitations when hiring non-EU residents for a fully remote position? I presume this refers to EU hirings. I think that would depend on the government, but as far as I'm concerned, there aren't.
I think the main restriction is mainly for the company is tax restriction. Like if they have no entity in the country, sometimes it's pretty hard because they have to set up an entity, and you have actually companies like Remote or whatsoever that actually started doing that business of like facilitating all the paperwork for companies to be able to do that. But one of the main problem is actually like if you are working in a country where there is no like subsidiaries or entity, they need to open an entity, or if not, they need to find another way to basically be able to provide you a contract. So that's kind of the challenge.
Yeah. There was a question referring to your comment, Romain, but I would like to open it up to the group. Romain told about the incentives and co, but what about like other incentives like working on cool projects, emerging tech projects that fits your values, make sense? Does it have an impact on the ability to keep people on board? From a layman's perspective, I would say, of course.
Total.
Please, Tim.
Yeah, I jump in there. Especially working on cool side projects, I call it like this, is very important to keep people's fun on the project on your company, because not every project, and we are not building products as Uber does, or we're working on projects for our clients, and they're sometimes very cool and sometimes not, as life is also. So but having the ability to give the people a way of learning and developing and research, and I think software developers or engineers are interested by design in new things. Yeah, they want to adapt, they want to learn, they want to keep the pulse of technology, and so you are forced to do this with good people. It's not only the money that keeps people in a company.
If I can add some stuff, when I think personally there are different things that can prevent churn. So we talk about the compensation, which is one, but there is other important things. We just talk about the importance of having all the social connections, and I think it's really important. It's another one. I can think of one example, like another one, which is during the COVID time, we actually keep on doing, at Uber, team events. Obviously, they were remote team events, but we, for example, had, like a cocktail making session where we had a professional, joining us, and we make cocktail, all over Zoom. Some of the engineers were playing Among Us, this famous game every Friday night or whatsoever. We played some Pictionary games, online and all that type of thing. So I think it's the other, it's a second aspect of it, which is like keeping the social connection, really deep, and maintaining that. The third thing is keeping a good spread of information about what's coming from the leadership, like the vision, the mission of the company, and ensuring that everyone at any level of the company still, know what are the objectives of the company, know the information about the company, how the company is doing, and all that type of stuff. It's really important because people, when, they feel that their day-to-day work are contributing to a bigger mission, a bigger result, and have a bigger impact, they really, feel part of that ecosystem. So that's really important, like ensuring that you have enough all hands, enough communications that go, to people, especially in the time where people are not sitting in the office anymore, and when the informations can be harder to find. And to answer more specifically to the question on cool projects, just giving an example at Uber, we had some more, let's say, social initiative. For example, one of my colleagues on the payment team was working on some initiative called Donates. So basically, you would be able to tip on top of your trip, and that money would go to a charity association. And basically, my colleague was working, let's say, 20 or 10% of her time as the PM on this project. And basically, they try to find a couple of people that work 10 or 20% of their time, and at the end, that's make a team. So basically, they have some of those projects, and you could pitch actually those projects as anyone within the org and start contributing into it for 20% of your time top, basically. So yeah, that's as well a good way to to keep people, and as well sometimes to do initiatives that you never have the time to squeeze in your roadmap, and that sometimes have a social impact. Like all those stuff about like sending people for vaccinations, or all those like donate projects that they just talked about, where people trying to push it inside Uber because they thought that this was the right thing to do, for the people across the globe.
Cool. Maybe Tansha, you want to say something to this, or you want to lead on the last question, which is quite hands-on, by Jeremy. How did your sprint setup change from in-person sprints to remote, i.e. length sprint, so like length daily meetings, sprint start, staging, QA, etc.? Or are there any changes at all?
So I have a unique perspective in this one, I think, because I actually I have the answer to this question from two companies within the COVID period. I don't know about the rest of the group. They definitely changed. For one, we started, I had teams which used to be only in the office that needed to become remote. So we started using things like Poker Ninja, we used Miro, we used a bunch of other stuff where in the beginning it used to be raise your hand and give the number of points, or two hands, whatever. Then that switched to a digital solution. To be honest, like these were just in-place replacements of things that happened in life. The problem with remote sprints is people adapting to COVID. So it definitely decreased the velocity, where people had, they couldn't leave their home for a while. For example, there were people that would work and their sprints needed to change because we had a decrease in velocity. People just didn't feel like working. That was a problem, right? Especially in the first months. So we had a few failures, then we figured out, we found our balance. Daily meetings are still, let's say, sometimes a problem, because when it's real life, it's called a stand-up because you should be standing up. When you're remote, that's not an option. So some people can continue for like 15 minutes, give their topic. So there's some changes that you need to adapt to. So, I mean, in all honesty, I would definitely say that things have changed. I can give you 1,000 different examples from the various teams that I've been working with. Probably the biggest problem, the biggest change I would say is that as COVID started, velocity of all teams went down because people started becoming less productive because of the lack of change of scenery, etc., etc. And then it went up as people normalized.
I can confirm to this, because we had schools that were closed. We have kindergartens closed. So people who normally had the ability to work 60% because their kids were away in school, stayed at home, so they did not work, and the teams decreased in numbers and as well in velocity. So, but as you said, it depends on the team how the things changed. We had some teams, they decided to get in longer sprints, and we have some teams that didn't change anything in the second place after a few weeks. So yeah, no global solution for this question, I think.
Yeah, if I can add one last thing, I think, yeah, on the methodology on our side, like nothing changed pretty much. Everything, was stayed the same. On the velocity, yes, I mean, everyone, was all impacted as a parent by keeping their kids at home, and obviously, that's disturbed them from, their normal working day. The pandemic as well itself, we had different sites all over the globe. I remember some really tough weeks where, for example, our teams in India were completely having to to not work in order to take care of their family member that were sick. It was a pretty tough day. Hopefully everyone was kind of like all together, so people from other countries in the world where the pandemic was in a more, let's say, low state were basically able to jump in order to cover for them. But yeah, obviously, like all these situations during COVID, like kind of affected productivity. It could be as well, like mentally, people were a bit as well drained, I think, at some point, so giving, day off to people, allowing people as well, like, to take a bit of vacations, breaks, and all that type of stuff were sometimes needed to ensure that, everyone was staying like mentally healthy. Because, I think the mental charge on everyone was quite heavy. So obviously it was something that was quite important to ensure that everyone was feeling okay.
Indeed, thank you very much. And thank you very much, everyone, for the effort and time. You guys really had a lot of content. Thank you a lot. And thank you also for people joining today. I'm already being pinged by my colleague, like, wrap it up. We don't want to keep every like anybody too long, but thank you very much to Tanjo, Tim, and Romain. Super cool. I look forward to the next one if you still have like patience for it. And thanks everyone for joining. There'll be a recording of this that we will share. Feel free to look at that as well if you missed parts, or share it, of course, if you feel like it.
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Yeah,
thank you, guys.
Thank you very much for having us.
It's been a pleasure. Have a good one.
Bye.
Bye-bye.